We've all seen this happen, right? A hashtag just explodes out of nowhere. A movement seems to form overnight. And then, bam, suddenly the entire world is paying attention. The thing is, the internet hasn't just given activists a new toolbox. No, it's completely redrawn the entire map for how social change happens. So today, we're going to break down the new unwritten rules of digital activism.
And this is really the big question, isn't it? On the surface, it feels like it should be a simple yes or no. But the reality is just so much more complex, and honestly, a lot more interesting than you might think. To really get to the bottom of it, we need to understand the new game that's being played. So let's just think of activism as a game. For centuries, the board and the rules were pretty much set in stone. But the internet, it didn't just add a few new pieces to the board, it basically threw out the entire rulebook and redesigned the game from the ground up. To get a real bird's-eye view of this, we're going to start with the work of scholar Manuel Castells. Castells calls our world the network society. And the core idea here is that power doesn't just sit in government buildings or in corporate headquarters anymore. Now, power flows. It flows through digital networks, it's fast, it's fluid, it's everywhere. So in this new game, you don't win by taking over a building, you win by taking over the network itself. So how in the world do you seize a network? Well, according to Castells, it's this really powerful one-two punch. First, you gotta occupy the public mind, and that almost always starts with outrage, an emotional spark that is just impossible to ignore. But outrage on its own just fizzles out. So to keep a movement going, you have to follow it up with hope, a clear, positive message that can travel through and eventually take over the communication channels. It's not just about getting mad online, it's about using that energy to completely reshape the entire public conversation.
Okay, so power flows through networks. Got it. But does that mean the game board is a level playing field? Oh, not even close. You can think of it as having these hidden hills and really deep valleys that can amplify some voices into a roar, while others, well, they're barely a whisper. To understand this new terrain, we're going to look at the work of Sandra González-Bailón.
The early promise of the internet was all about this pure democratic potential. It made it so much easier for people to get organized. It lowered what academics call coordination costs, which is just a fancy way of saying it's way easier to get a bunch of people on the same page. In theory, this meant anyone could start a grassroots, bottoms-up movement without needing big money or traditional leaders.
Yeah, but we all kind of know it doesn't really work that way, don't we? You could have the most amazing idea in the world, but does your post, your voice, truly have the same shot at being heard as everyone else's? The answer is a hard no, because the very structure of the network creates its own kind of inequality. And this brings us to this idea called degree centrality. Now, it sounds super technical, I know, but it's actually incredibly simple. It just means some people in a network have way more connections than others. Think about a celebrity's social media account versus, say, yours or mine. When they say something, it instantly reaches millions. It's not because it's a better idea, it's a structural advantage that's literally built into the game board. Their voice is just positioned to travel farther and faster. And that's before we even get to the algorithms. On top of this already uneven network, you've got algorithms that are designed for one thing: engagement. They're built to show us what's already popular. So a message from a really well-connected account gets an initial boost, the algorithm sees that activity, and then it amplifies it even more. It creates this powerful feedback loop. The game board isn't just tilted, it's designed to roll the ball downhill for the people who are already at the top.
So, what do we have? We have a networked game board that's tilted in favor of the super well-connected. What kind of moves can you even make in a game like this? Well, it turns out the very nature of protest itself has had to change. Let's zoom right in on the specific tactics of what's called digital disobedience, using some research from Züger and his colleagues.
The classic protest playbook was all about visible personal sacrifice. Think of activists getting arrested, occupying a physical street, all to make this big moral appeal to the public and the government. But digital disobedience? It is a whole different ballgame. It's often anonymous, it's distributed across thousands of people you will never meet, and instead of blocking a street, the goal is to disrupt digital infrastructure.
This quote just nails it. Our whole world now runs on data that's flowing through these digital pipes, everything from finance to government. So the new protest doesn't just block a physical road, it actually tries to clog the pipes of the entire data-driven system. That is a fundamental shift in what disruption even means. But here's the big twist. The game board, It isn't owned by the players. The platforms where all this stuff is happening, the social media giants, they're the ones who make the game. And when they don't like how you're playing, well, they can change the rules whenever they want. So let's zoom back out with the work of Klang and Madison to see how these radical new tactics get, well, neutralized.
They call this process domestication, and it's something we've all seen happen. A new edgy tactic pops up, like activists hijacking a corporate hashtag to get a message out. At first, it's shocking, it's disruptive, but over time, the platforms adopt, we all get used to it, and it just gets absorbed into the normal, chaotic flow of online life. It's been tamed.
And this process, it follows a really predictable cycle. First, a genuinely disruptive tactic appears. Then, the platforms react. They tweak their algorithms or their terms of service to manage it. After that, it goes mainstream. You start seeing brands using it for marketing, or it becomes a meme. And by the end of it, the tactic that was once this powerful tool of protest has completely lost its original edgy impact.
What this does is it leaves activists in this perpetual cat and mouse game. They have to constantly innovate, constantly invent new ways to be disruptive, because they know that yesterday's radical move is already on its way to becoming today's mainstream meme. In this game, there is no final move. So, where does all this leave us? It really seems like activism today is a game with no final whistle. It's just a never-ending cycle of moves and countermoves, all played on a board that is constantly changing right under the player's feet.
So let's just quickly retrace the journey we just took. First, Castells showed us the entire game board is now built on these digital networks. Then, González-Bailón revealed that this board is anything but flat. Some players start with a huge structural advantage. After that, Züger and his colleagues walked us through the radical new moves that are possible in this digital world. And finally, Klang and Madison reminded us that the game makers themselves are always rewriting the rules to tame the players.
And all of that leaves us with one last, really critical question. In a game that's played on a tilted board where the rules are always in flux, what does it even mean to win? How is victory redefined in the network society? It's definitely something to think about the next time you see a movement just catch fire online. Thanks for joining me for this one.